This is the tragic real-life story of the man whose journey became the film Into the Wild. At first, nobody knew who the body belonged to, only that it was that of a young man. He was 5 foot 8 inches tall and weighed only 67 pounds when he died. He had obviously lain there on an abandoned bus in the Alaskan wilderness for days. And although the mystery of the dead hiker's identity would eventually be solved, he would always remain an enigma. Christopher Johnson McCandless was born on February 12, 1968 in El Segundo, California. His parents were Walt and Wilhelmina McCandless, and he had a younger sister called Carine. His father also had 6 other children from a previous marriage, all of whom lived with their mother. When Chris McCandless was about 8 years old, his family moved to Virginia and Washington, D.C. His father was employed by NASA, while his mother worked at an aerospace and defense company. Later, the pair formed their own profitable business and worked from home. At high school, McCandless did well both in academics and sports, making captain of the cross-country team. McCandless made his first long journey before starting university, touring 10,000 miles in his car with just himself for company. Then, straight after graduating from Emory University with honors, he took to traveling even more earnestly. Giving the bulk of his money away to charity and severing links with his family, the young graduate took odd jobs to subsidize his nomadic way of life. During the early 1990s, McCandless made his way through Arizona and California to South Dakota. By now, he was going by the alias Alexander Supertramp. In Arizona, he ditched his car and began hitchhiking. Alex spent October 1990 working in South Dakota for grain elevator owner Wayne Westerberg. Then, after an illegal excursion into Mexico, he returned to work for Westerberg again in January 1992. 3 months later, in April 1992, McCandless began his journey north. He sent Westerberg a final postcard from Fairbanks, Alaska on April 27th of that year. "This is the last you shall hear from me, Wayne," he wrote. "It might be a very long time before I return south. If this adventure proves fatal and you don't ever hear from me again, I want you to know you're a great man. I now walk into the wild, Alex." The last person to see Chris McCandless alive was Fairbanks resident Jim Gallion. The local electrician gave McCandless a lift to the start of the Stampede Trail, the challenging hiking track where McCandless was headed. Gallion told the New Yorker in 1993 that he asked the young adventurer if he was carrying a compass. "I don't want a compass," came the reply. "I don't have to know where I am." McCandless lacked more than a compass, however. Gallion noted that the hiker carried only a light backpack and appeared woefully unprepared for the rough trail ahead. But despite the old man's repeated warnings, McCandless would not be dissuaded. The only concession Alex, as he'd introduced himself, made was to accept a sandwich and a pair of rubber boots from Gallion. The next time anyone saw Chris McCandless, at least as far as we know, was on September 6, 1992. That day, hunters Gordon Sammel and Ken Thompson were among 6 people who happened to arrive at the converted bus McCandless had been living in. It was parked next to the Stampede Trail near the Denali National Park boundary. On the door of the bus was a note. "SOS, I need your help. I'm injured, near death, and too weak to hike out here." It read, "I am all alone. This is no joke. In the name of God, please remain to save me. I am out collecting berries close by and shall return this evening. Thank you, Chris McCandless. August?" The note, along with the terrible stench, were ominous signs. Through the window, Thompson and Sammel saw a blue sleeping bag on a bunk. I stood on a stump, reached through a back window, and gave the bag a shake. Sammel told John Krakauer, writing for Outside Magazine in 1993. It wasn't until I walked around to the other side and saw a head sticking out that I knew for certain what it was. The following morning, the body of Chris McCandless was airlifted out by helicopter. It had been lying there for about 2.5 weeks. Starvation was considered the most likely cause of death, but the deceased's identity was a mystery. That is, until his last employer, Wayne Westerberg, heard about the dead hiker on a radio broadcast and helped to identify McCandless. One of the first people to be fascinated by the Chris McCandless story was journalist John Krakauer. After writing his article about the tragedy for Outside, he went on to author a best-selling book on the subject. That book, Into the Wild, captured the imagination of millions, and in 2007 it was made into an award-winning Hollywood movie by Sean Penn. Every year now, people from around the globe visit the site where Chris McCandless died. These modern-day pilgrims brave cold river waters and mosquito swarms to leave notes on the dilapidated bus. Moreover, many of them are as unprepared for the hike as McCandless was. Sadly, one visitor from Switzerland drowned in a river while on a trail to the bus. However, not everyone is so admiring. Some Alaskans in particular. He's been glorified in death because he was unprepared, according to Dermot Cole, a columnist for the Fairbanks Daily News Miner. Meanwhile, Craig Medred from the Anchorage Daily News went even further in a 2013 article in which he called McCandless a suicidal narcissist and a bum, thief, and a poacher. Brave adventurer or clueless greenhorn, the debate around McCandless continues. He's had plenty of defenders, among them Sean Penn. I think he did very well by any standard, including Alaskan, the actor and director told Men's Journal in 2012. Krakauer, too, is on McCandless' side. He wasn't incompetent, he wrote in his book. He wouldn't have lasted 113 days if he were. How McCandless supported himself during his time in the wilderness is recorded in his diary. The young man lived on a meager diet of squirrels, birds, and berries. Only once did he manage to snare something sizable when he shot a moose, but sadly he didn't know how to preserve the meat. Racked by hunger at one point, he unsuccessfully tried to walk to the highway before returning to the bus to continue his descent into starvation. Moreover, Krakauer does not believe it was unpreparedness that killed McCandless. In his book, he speculates that the hapless backpacker was poisoned by the seeds of the wild potato. Indeed, since the book's publication, Krakauer has had these seeds tested extensively. Based on the results, the author believes toxins in the seeds, not simply starvation, are likely responsible for McCandless' tragic death. Even if the how of Chris McCandless' death was ever to be agreed upon, the why will always be a puzzle. In 2014, his sister Carine published a book, The Wild Truth, about her brother and their family. In it, she details the abuse she and Chris suffered at the hands of their parents. She thinks this is what drove her sibling to leave home and cut all family ties. Still, she does not blame their parents for his death. I think Chris would have been an adventurer and drawn to nature no matter what, Carine told Outside in 2014. I think it was just innate. There are a lot of people who go off and do extreme adventures, but the difference is that they let someone know where they're going.